So here we are, just over 2 months. It's almost 2 months to the weekend since we recorded this, Dad's version of this video, and here we are talking about Mum, which is obviously very sad, not altogether unexpected, but very sad and unexpected how quickly it was.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we want to talk about first. Is a lot of people have said, Mama's gone because she was so upset about Dad.
She's given up.
So on, she gave up because after Dad went, and that absolutely wasn't the case.
No, not at all.
Now she was obviously completely devastated when Dad passed away.
Yes.
Absolutely devastated, but she knew that was coming, and they'd been talking before about her plans. They'd changed her car. They'd worked through all the finances,
She
worked
found
all the
new
details
things
out.
to go and join.
She had a list of things that she was going to go and join and go and do.
Yes.
But it was only after Christmas and after things had passed that it became truly apparent just how fast her health was declining.
So between Christmas and New Year, she declined very, very rapidly.
Yeah.
And then had a difficult diagnosis in the end of the first week of January.
Yes.
And then it was, I think, 4 days later that she went to bed.
She went to bed and felt that she wasn't able to get out of bed again. Yes. But she fought right to the very end.
She did.
She absolutely did not give in.
No.
Well, she knew she wasn't going to get better and wasn't going to get back to everything else. She also did not just roll over and give up.
No, she wanted to be here for as long as she could be.
Yeah.
And she kept, every morning the routine was the same. When she woke, she wanted a hairbrush to brush her hair and put her hearing aids in, and then she wanted her Bible.
Well, she didn't use the hairbrush to put her hearing aids in.
Okay, she wanted to brush her hair first, then put her hearing aids in, and then read her Bible.
Yes.
And then the Telegraph.
And then the Telegraph.
In that order,
Yeah.
every morning.
Yeah.
Right up until about 3 or 4 days.
Yes, only a couple of days, which was really our indication that it was very near the end, was when she wasn't able to read the Bible, and she didn't even ask for it. And that was the first time she didn't ask for it, just a few days before, and that was really the indication that we were very near the end.
Yeah. And she, we've looked at her tablet since and seen that she was still emailing friends, very close to the end, wasn't she?
Yes.
Still as sharp as ever, and a lot of the carers commented on that, on just, how with it and sharp she still was.
Yes, yes. If she could hear you, she was still up for a conversation.
Yeah.
Until only a few days before.
Including asking you if you could spell Elizabeth.
She did ask me if I could spell Elizabeth.
And asking you if you could make jelly.
Yes. My jelly making abilities were questioned before I was entrusted with a boiling kettle and a jug. Mum was born in 1941 and grew up in Liss.
She attended Petersfield High School.
In 1959 she went to Weymouth Teaching College.
Following the 3-year course, she taught at Borden and then at Southsea Junior School, and it was while she was there that she met Dad. So we ought to talk about when Mum first met Dad.
Oh yes, of course, yes.
Because to start with, he pulled up in a car alongside her and offered her a lift. And at that point she'd sort of forgotten she'd met him before.
Met him at a party
and brushed him off saying, I don't take lifts from strangers. And then he explained he had met her. And she let him drive around the corner. But then on one of their very first dates, he committed a cardinal sin.
He did.
Didn't he?
Yes.
Which was that he arrived wearing a flat cap. And she had an absolute abhorrence of flat caps. And I think were they walking by the seaside, because it's Southsea, wasn't it, of course, where they met.
Yes, that's it.
And they'd gone for a walk, and the wind caught the flat cap and blew it off, and she laughed like a drain, and I think that was the last time Dad ever wore one.
Yes, he was never allowed to wear it. He was allowed other types of hats.
But
never a flat cap.
And that's probably because our granddad wore a flat cap all the time,
yes,
didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. They were married in 1970.
In 1971, they had me, and Mum stopped teaching at that point.
In 1973, I came along to join the family.
So having being a teacher through to when she had me.
Yeah.
That was at a time when it wasn't quite, the done thing to go back to work as a teacher, when you had, certainly small preschool children.
Yeah.
And after you were born, she became a childminder.
She did. I think I was about 3 when she started.
Yes. And she was determined to do that in part because she didn't want to, what Mum and Dad could have done with the money of a full-time job and a teacher's salary. She felt that she wanted to be home for when we came home from school, to be there for us when we came in. So she gave up the teaching to be there for us. But then she filled the house with children and became a big part of so many children's lives.
Absolutely.
From, she had some from when they were born through to when they went to school, and in one case, in Michael's case, from when he was born through to the age of 19. So a huge part of these children's lives.
And they became a huge part of our lives because they became our friends that we played with when we got in from school.
Yes, we'd get in from school, and she, would typically have them over quite a lot of the summer holiday as well.
Yes.
So we'd see them all day during the summer holidays as well, and the school holidays. And you said, she was part of setting up the Childminders group.
So National Association of Childminders, Mum was part of the setting up of that, which was to move childminding really from being something that mums did to get an extra income into being a profession. And so there was training available, there was networking opportunities, and as the expectations of Ofsted increased on childminders, there was then support. So Mum then ran a local network as well, and then was then approached to be a teacher and assessor for the MVQ for both childminders and people working in preschools and nurseries, which she really enjoyed. Enjoyed having those sorts of students.
She looked after many children over the years, including Michael, who she provided respite care for up to the age of 19.
In 1981, the family moved to Davonnier. So we can't really talk about Mum without talking about gardening and her absolute passion for everything floral. Not just floral, but green.
Yes, green, because she quite liked her vegetables as well. She's
did.
very enthusiastic about her vegetables.
So when we were much, much younger and lived at Anmore Road, she and Dad took on an extra garden, didn't they?
They did, yes.
So that they could grow vegetables.
Yes, because up to then our garden had been very much vegetables with a thin strip of flowers, round the front, and then all vegetables behind. And then they took the extra garden on, and Mum was able to then get more into the floral side of things.
And then, of course, when we moved out to Davonnier.
Well, that was the criteria when they chose the house, because actually Davonnier, as we moved into it, was a smaller house than the one they'd sold. But it was bought primarily because it had a nice big garden, and they were going to be able to do all the outdoorsy things that they wanted to do.
And then the same was really the criteria when we bought this place.
Yes.
Was though Mum did joke that when she'd asked for a blank canvas, she didn't realise quite how blank the canvas would be when they first got here and saw the scale of what they needed to take on.
They would have thought, having lived with the clay of Davonnier, she would have learnt her lesson and actually stuck a spade into the ground before buying it, rather than spending the next 16 years grumbling about how hard it was to dig anything in. But then it's amazing that she was able to scale those banks until her late 70s.
Yeah,
she was able to go up and down these banks.
She was a founding member of Hampshire Association of Childminders,
organising conferences and day seminars. We also talk about church and the huge part that church played. And we only found out last week that we knew Mum had obviously trained as a teacher.
Yeah.
And we assumed, we thought it was teaching and history and education and history.
History or English language was what I sort of assumed were her.
Yes, but we actually found out it was divinity.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Makes a lot of sense, but we didn't know it. But church was a big part, though there was a certain amount of rebellion in there as well, though you can see the flip side of that she came from this strict Brethren background and then came into the Baptist church and threw herself into that.
Yes, I think when they joined the church there were half a dozen people. It was at the end of the road where they'd just bought a house, and they decided they ought to visit that before they went anywhere else, didn't they?
Yeah.
And swiftly got involved, but it went from being a very little church to being quite a buzzy and vibrant
Yes.
church for many, many years. Yeah, Mum was a deacon, wasn't she?
She was a deacon for many, many years.
She ran the Sunday school.
Often led the Tuesday Bible studies, Tuesday evening Bible studies.
Yeah, was church organist all the way through.
But no, played the organ for years and years. Even when it became a band, and she'd still be part of the band.
Yes, she'd still be part of the band. There was a very funny moment years ago with the organ, where somebody decided that the church building was getting quite warm.
Yes.
And that they'd go and turn off the big heaters that were in the church. And so they popped out into the vestry and thought that instead of fiddling around to find which was the switch for the heaters, they'd just flick the main power off halfway through a hymn. And so the organ just stopped, congregation kept singing, and then the person who'd done it suddenly realised what they'd done and flicked it back on, and up came the organ again with a bit of a as it got itself up to speed.
Back up to speed.
And Mum was still at the right place in the music.
She became a reading private tutor.
She became an assessor and lecturer for early years education, NVQ.
And I guess a lot of people who've seen Mum getting out of the car having been driven somewhere by Dad, or maybe see her pull in, having driven herself, won't realise that she was started off her motoring days at quite a young age on the moped.
She did. And continued unusually on a moped or a scooter until her mid-50s.
Until her mid-50s, before she gave up two wheels and
which is why she couldn't object at all when I wanted to ride a motorbike.
No. And I remember riding on the back
Yeah.
with her driving. And
went all over the place. Went off to appointments here and there, and libraries and bits of shopping and so on.
Only gave it up, as you say, in her mid-50s when she got a car and learnt to drive. She tried learning to drive for a long time.
She had, with Dad as a teacher,
Dad
which I think we referred to when we were talking about Dad.
Yes, Dad's driving teaching.
Yes, was not all it should have been.
No,
But she found a great teacher in Mr. Glasspool, and then she's carried on driving and wanting to maintain that independence.
Only about a month since she was last driving her car.
Yes.
She retired in 2006.
Mum and Dad had sold the house 3 weeks before Mum retired, and they were due to move here to Ven Cross. So for those last 3 weeks, she worked whilst living in a caravan.
We also ought to talk about cooking.
We should talk about cooking.
Because
yes, that was another
cooking was a huge,
big passion.
Big part of Mum. But I remember Sunday afternoons and
washing up.
Well, yes, we'd have Sunday lunch, wouldn't we?
We would.
And then
it was our
job to wash up.
Mum would be busily baking at the same time.
Yes.
And we'd try to race through the washing up to not be handed all of the baking stuff to wash up as well.
And we failed every
week,
single time.
Every week.
Because she could bake at an amazing speed.
Yes.
And it would be handed the bowl from the Kenwood mixer.
Yeah.
And a beater and the various other implements. And told to get them washed because the next cake needed to be done.
Yes.
And she'd probably be sat down with a cup of coffee before we actually reached the end of the washing up, having baked 2 cakes, in the 2 or 3 cakes in the interim.
And it was always a good day to get back from school on the day when she baked the bread.
The bread, yes.
Because if we timed it right, we'd get in from school with the hot rolls just come out the oven.
Yes.
In fact, when Jill and Steve Phillips came to Dad's funeral, Jill commented that Steve only agreed to come to church because of the quality of Mum's pies that he'd had at the Harvest Supper, and that had been the reason why he came to church.
Yes.
So Harvest Supper was legendary, wasn't it?
It was.
With the quiches and pies that she would bake.
Yes.
Devil's food cake. That was a real moment of pride for her, though, when Nancy baked her a devil's food cake. Yeah. And she had to admit it was really rather good. So she's passed on her cooking ability.
Yes. Though I remember when I left home to go to university, I got handed a beginner's cookbook of Mum written recipes.
I've still got mine.
Yes,
I've got mine. I still add to mine every now and then. It's my major cookbook
that
I got sent away to uni with. They created, designed and built the garden here at Vencross.
It was open as part of Waterrow Open Gardens in conjunction with the house next door and was known as Railway Gardens.
They then opened for the National Garden Scheme for many years, including welcoming bus tours, one of them I think from Scotland.
She enjoyed 2 trips to Canada to visit her brother and family. There was Wednesday Club.
There was, with around 100 children.
150 children
yes.
at its peak, yes.
And Mum would do a bit of song, a bit of teaching, and then there'd be games and activities that Mum and Dad would, and other helpers.
And other helpers, yes.
Would run with the children. And then a lot of those would access DABS.
Yes.
Wouldn't they?
Yes, most of those children would then come along to DABS as well.
Yeah. And that's probably where we need to talk about puppets.
We do need to talk about puppets, don't we?
We have a couple of puppets here. So
these probably date from slightly later than DABS in many cases.
Silly Rabbit appeared in the later years of DABS, so this
True.
is Silly Rabbit, as did Gummy.
Yes, Gummy did
was
in the
there.
later years.
It was Mr. Hedge who's
Mr. Hedge.
actually
Mr. Hedge
your puppet.
was mine and isn't here because I forgot to bring him today, and hasn't been used for a few years now. But yeah,
and
Gummy and Silly Rabbit.
Although these were a big part of DABS, they've also been a big part of Wellington Baptist Church as well.
Yes, because even after she moved down here, she was part of the
with
children's work.
With puppet shows with Silly Rabbit and Gummy. Which I'm not going to try and do Silly Rabbit's voice.
No. Silly Rabbit has now gone mute, unfortunately.
In the last month before Mum passed away, we've had several lovely messages from people who have known her for many years, and we thought we'd like to share just a few of the comments with you. This one is from one of her dear friends, Jill, who she worked with in Denmead, and she says, Pat was a huge influence on my life. I first met her when I joined the Denmead Childminders group. We all used to meet at Tracy's house and Pat would lead the meetings. I helped Pat run Wednesday Toddlers group for many years. I've such fond memories from then. We always have lots of lovely craft for the children to do, and Pat would do a puppet show at the Christmas party. I also worked with Pat at DABS, which was such great fun. Angie and I decided to do our MVQ and asked Pat if she would be our assessor. She was amazing and helped us pass our course, supporting us with all her knowledge and experience with children. Pat was a huge support and inspiration in my life. I don't think I would have had a 20-year career in early years without her and her unending support.
And this one is from Kirstine. I really wanted to tell Pat how special she is, how much she was loved. Rebecca can still remember her and spending time with her. She helped out when Peter was born. My husband Brandon was away at sea and I was very ill. She is the embodiment of Christian life, lived in the footsteps of her Saviour. She was also practical in all that she did. Walking through her garden and that she and Bill had created was a joy, as her sense of wonder that God had provided.
This message came from one of the many children that Mum childminded over the years. Her name was Naomi, and Jeremy and I remember her really fondly. Naomi says, I have fond memories of being looked after by Auntie Pat at Davenir, playing outside in the lovely big garden, being taught how to make bread and cakes, painting and many other activities. I always felt loved there, and I know Mum knew I was safe and well looked after too. I also remember spending summers with her at DABS, and at the end of the day going back to Davenir until I was picked up by Mum. The memories don't stop there either, with Wednesday evenings spent at Wednesday Club having fun with others and having that familiar constant of Auntie Pat there all the time.
I think the side of Grandma that no one really saw too much of was her funny side. I remember one time when I was kind of 12 or 13, we were sat at Christmas Day lunch and we had the bottles of J2O, and she nudged me and said, gestured to the bottle and it said, shake me gently. And she said, they should put that on a t-shirt. And I remember being horrified at the time at my grandma saying that to me. And then when I was a lot younger, at primary school, after school, I used to go along with her and I'd do some extra maths, and she used to help me with my maths homework. And we used to do a lot of number bonds to 10 when I was very young. And then I remember many years later, her at Sunday roast, when the whole family was there, stopping lunch and saying to me, "Oh, Sam, you know, we used to do a lot of number bonds together. You still getting okay with your number bonds? You still doing okay? Because we can do a bit more." We come and go, "No, no, Grandma, I'm 21. I think I've got them by now." And I was a bit confused at the time. But looking back, I think that was just her sense of humour shining through, and it's not a side a lot of people saw.
The best thing about Grandma was the fact that no matter how old she got, we would be able to play games like Rummikub, Quirkle, all of that along her end. She'd always cook the best apple crumble. She had so many amazing things, and considering her age and the fact that she was also battling cancer, it's amazing the stuff that she decided to do, even though she was fighting so hard. Because she tried to be the most positive she could through a hard time, and it didn't only help her, but it helped the whole family.
I liked how when I wanted to cook, I could always go ask for ingredients.
Being outside reminds me of you, Grandma.
Bought a Bible with my birthday money, Grandma. I love you. I love you, Grandma, and I miss you lots.